Check, check, check. Check, 1, 2. Check, check. I got light on. Light on.
Mine's on.
You're on?
Again?
Takes like a minute. Takes a minute. 30 seconds. 30 seconds. Okay, here we go. Thank you, Ted. Okay, welcome all. Today is Monday, May 23rd. I'm Councilmember Joe Buscaino, Chair of Public Works and Gain Reduction Committee. I'd like to welcome my colleagues, Mr. O'Farrell, Ms. Martinez, Mr. Rue, and each and every one of you here in the audience. Thank you for joining us. And those listening on council audio, we welcome you as well. If I can now direct your attention to today's Public Works and Gain Reduction Committee agenda. I do have speaker cards, let's see, on 2 and 3. Okay, we'll hold those on. If we can take items 1 and 5 on consent, unless any of my colleagues here want to hold those 2 items. Hearing none. Okay, that'll be the order. We'll approve items 1 and 5 on consent. Let's actually get general public comment out of the way. Anyone here on general public comment? Speak on an item not on the agenda?
John White, City Clerk. No cards have been submitted, sir.
Okay, we'll close general public comment. Okay, with that, let's now turn to item number 2.
Item 2, motion Koretz-Huizar relative to an action taken by the Board of Public Works to deny an appeal of a Bureau of Engineering determination to locate an above-ground facility proposed by Cable Engineering Services on behalf of Verizon at 6400 West Drexel Avenue. On May 3rd, 2016, the Council approved motion to assert jurisdiction over the action taken by the Board of Public Works, pursuant to Charter Section 245.
Okay, so we have before us a 245 motion, colleagues, from Mr. Koretz. I do have a few speaker cards here. Please come up when I call your name. Rob Glushan. And followed by Sean Regan. I'm sorry, R.E. Regis. Regan? Please come up, ma'am. Okay, Mr. Glushan, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. This is a very, 245 is unique in and of itself, but it's near and dear to me because I was on the Elected Charter Commission when we crafted the 245. There are going to be occasions where non-elected officials make decisions that may run contrary, in this case, to CEQA, some due process, and also historical resources. And the buck should stop with you folks. Thank you to Councilmember Koretz for bringing this motion. This is a very unique situation with an AGF above-ground facility for cell tower that was approved in front of Ms. Reagan's home, which just recently was voted unanimously to be a historical monument by the Cultural Heritage Commission. It's pending in council. Tremendous community support from the LA County Museum of Art, UCLA Architecture. I can go on, but I would just like to make these letters, which are just a portion of letters of support for it. And again, just to say to you, this is a unique case where the categorical exemption, which normally does apply to these AGFs, doesn't apply here where you have a historic resource that everybody agrees with. We would ask for your support.
Thank you. Ms. Regan?
I just wanted to say thank you. I live in a Richard Neutra house, and I think he's a great asset, these historical buildings, to the city of Los Angeles, and I'd very much like to thank all of you for considering this. So thank you.
Thank you. And Jeff Eppenstein, representing Mr. Koretz's office.
Good afternoon, members. Thank you. Jeff Eppenstein from Council District 5. Regarding item number 2, Council District 5 requests that pursuant to Charter Section 245, the action be to veto and reverse the decision of the Board of Public Works on April 18, 2016. On April 18th, the Board of Public Works acted to deny an appeal of the BOE determination to locate an AGF proposed by Cable Engineering on behalf of Verizon at 6400 West Drexel Avenue. Initially, we 245 the matter on the basis of a lack of due process, as our constituent was out of the country and unable to testify at the hearing. In addition, on April 21st, 2016, the Cultural Heritage Commission voted unanimously to designate the home at 6400 West Drexel Avenue as a historic cultural monument. Final approval of such historical designation is pending before Council. Based on the action of the Cultural Heritage Commission, and further based on support for such historical designation by community stakeholders and Councilmember Koretz, the categorical exemption adopted by BOE and Board of Public Works for the AGF permit does not apply because of the unique circumstances of potential significant impacts on a historical resource. Again, based on such findings, we ask the committee recommend that Council veto and reverse the decision of the Board of Public Works for the AGF permit at 6400 West Drexel Avenue. Also, lastly, I would like to thank City staff and Verizon. They did end up withdrawing the application, and we thank everybody for their support in this matter. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, no other speakers on this item? And for the record, John, you mentioned that the time's not working, so any other speakers, if you're out of the 2-minute, once your 2-minute mark is hit, he'll just scream and say, time's up. Just kidding. He won't scream. The buzzer doesn't work, but the clock works. Okay. Okay, so with that, item number 2, it was indicated that Verizon withdrew its request to install at this location, the AGF. So with that, the recommendation would be to veto the action of the Board of Public Works and remand the matter back to the board. Are we okay with that, colleagues? Any objections? No objections? Okay, no objections. Here are no objections. That'll be the order. Okay, item number 3.
Item 3, CLA and CAO joint report relative to retaining an expert in petroleum and natural gas engineering or geology in order to provide technical advice to the Council when it considers legislation relating to oil and gas production or conveyance in Los Angeles pursuant to motion Bonin, Koretz, Wesson, Krikorian, Huizar.
Thank you. So I understand we have the CLA's office and the CAO's office here to present on this item. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Quintanello with the CLA. I'm going to provide an overview of the report that the CLA and the CAO prepared. So in response to, our report was in response to 2 motions. The first was introduced on April 1st, 2015 and instructed the CLA to hire or retain a credible expert in petroleum and natural gas engineering or geology to provide technical advice to the City Council. That motion was considered by the Energy and Environment Committee, and they further instructed us to work with the CAO and other relevant city departments to determine their needs in the petroleum and natural gas field and to develop an associated scope of work for that technical expert. The second motion was introduced in February 2016 and instructed the CAO to hire a full-time petroleum administrator with experience and credentials in the petroleum, oil, and gas field for the CAO to evaluate and report on how best to institutionalize that function and where to house it, and also ask the CAO and CLA to report on cost recovery options for that position, specifically asking us to look at whether or not the cost could be borne by the permitting and franchise fees. So our report takes those 2 motions and addresses 3 topics. The first is departmental needs, which was addressed in the first motion. So as instructed by E&E, we met with several departments over the course of a few months. We met with City Planning, Bureau of Sanitation, Department of Transportation, Department of Building and Safety, Fire Department, Bureau of Engineering. During those meetings, the departments provided us with an overview of their petroleum and natural gas needs, their roles in petroleum and natural gas administration, and in state and federal oversight, the administrative challenges they face in performing their roles, and how these challenges might be addressed through the hiring of a petroleum and natural gas expert. They also assisted us in developing a scope of work for a technical expert. So the second thing that we addressed was the petroleum administration function and the development of a hybrid approach. Right now, the Petroleum Administration function is outlined in the admin code, and the CAO is charged with managing petroleum matters affecting the city. Currently, the CAO does not staff a full-time petroleum administrator, and they've indicated that this is due to the technical and intermittent nature of the work. It's made it difficult to retain someone full-time to perform that work. Our meetings with the departmental working group, during those meetings, we considered the way that the two motions overlapped and how we could address the concerns in those two motions with one office or potentially one role. And so through that, we developed this hybrid approach to address both the need for a petroleum administrator and a petroleum technical expert. So our report proposes the creation of the Petroleum and Natural Gas Administration and Safety Office. This office would be housed in the Board of Public Works, and it would require the transfer of the Petroleum Administration function from the CAO to the Board of Public Works. The administrator would oversee several employees, allowing the office to address a range of issues addressed in both motion or raised in both motions. The approach is hybrid because while the office would be overseen by a petroleum administrator and have several employees, they would also have access to the Bureau of Engineering's geotechnical on-call list. So it would allow the office to address a breadth of issues without retaining staff specialized in particular areas the council had concern regarding. The administrator would also perform those functions currently delineated in the administrative code. They would manage drilling leases, and they would also assume all duties related to the city's franchise agreements. This would require a transfer of the franchise management function from the Department of Transportation to the Board of Public Works. During budget deliberations, when the Budget and Finance Committee was considering the Board of Public Works 2016-2017 proposed budget, they addressed the transfer of some of these functions. And so this modifies recommendation 1 in our report slightly. In the budget, Council approved the transfer of the function from the CAO to the Board of Public Works and also authorized funding for that position, but Council did not address the transfer of the function from DOT to the Board of Public Works. So you would still need to act on that portion of recommendation 1. Additionally, with recommendation 2, the authorization for the position, Council has authorized funding for next fiscal year for the position, but our recommendation is to authorize funding currently so that with the time that we have left in this fiscal year, we can begin looking for a petroleum administrator and get the office running. So that brings us to the third area that our report addresses, which is the franchise agreements. One of the instructions in the February 2nd motion was to explore cost recovery options, specifically asking our offices to look at whether or not the cost of the petroleum administrator could be covered through franchise fees. Working with the departmental working group, we identified a need for short-term extensions for a lot of the city's franchise agreements. This includes the SoCalGas franchise. So currently, the Department of Transportation grants 50 companies franchise agreements. And they're transporting liquids, vapor, gaseous materials. This includes oil and oil products. The city collects approximately $2 million in annual revenue from the oil pipeline franchise agreements, $17 million for gas and about $200,000 for electrical. Of these franchise agreements, if you look at the report, attachment 2 provides a list of all the franchise agreements. 34 are expired and require new franchises. DOT continues to accept fees on those franchises, and 6 franchises will expire within the next 12 months. So our offices recommend approval of template ordinances to allow for a 2-year term with an additional 1 year of extension to provide time to renegotiate those agreements and bring them current. This will allow DOT the time to develop safety language improvements, look at best practices, evaluate new safety standards that have been imposed by the state, and incorporate those into the new agreements. Additionally, it will also give us time to report back on the needs of the new office and hire a petroleum administrator and bring that person online so that they can advise on what should be included in the new franchise agreements. DOT and the city attorney are currently finalizing the extensions for the expired franchise agreements. They have advised that the expired franchise agreements require an accounting of assets, and so they're working on developing those accounting of assets before coming to council for approval of those new agreements. The report also provided an update on the SoCalGas franchise. That has been pulled out of our report. The city attorney submitted a report and an ordinance on March 23rd, and council has taken action on that. So the SoCal Gas franchise extension is going forward on its own, independent of our report. Additionally, Councilmember Englander introduced a motion addressing safety standards in the SoCal Gas franchise agreement. As I'm sure you know, with that agreement having expired, we can only extend it. Right now, we can't change any of the terms. So it would be extended for a short period of time, and then the terms would be renegotiated. That's all I have.
Thank you so much for your report. A question on the time frame of the establishment of this office. What are you looking at?
Right now, we don't have a clear answer for that. Our third recommendation in the report is to allow us 90 days to report back so that we can evaluate exactly what the office will need and figure out how long that would take to hire the administrator and to get any potential staff online.
Hi, I'm David Hirano with the Office of CAO. Well, I concur with Jennifer's comments. I think there are a couple important steps that need to happen. The council needs to affirm the exemption of the principal project coordinator position to allow it to be filled. The Board of Public Works needs to recruit and identify eligible candidates to hire into that position. And then the Civil Service Commission needs to act to formally establish the position. So those are the three things that need to occur. Technically, the funding for the position isn't in the budget until July 1st, but I think everyone is suggesting that the council give authority for the board to begin hiring now. And so I think the only other thing that might help is if the council can affirm the exemption through Personnel Committee fairly quickly as we move forward.
Thank you, David. I do want to before I turn it over to my colleagues, I'd like to invite Matt Peterson from the Mayor's Office. He's our Chief Sustainability Officer to speak on this item. Thank you, Jennifer. And I'll turn it over to for questions.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you to your colleagues as well. And of course, thank you for your leadership on sustainability and all you each do to help the city be a better place. I want to also thank you for moving this item expeditiously forward. My office has been engaged in many of these issues, certainly around Aliso Canyon and abandoned orphaned oil wells and other matters that saddle our neighborhoods with concerns around noise, nuisances, and health concerns. And this position is going to be critical in helping the community address their concerns with over 825 active wells, and a significant number of them are near homes, schools, churches, parks. And so that's why it's necessary to move aggressively forward. In our research on the field and trying to understand it better so we could better support the departments and help the mayor move forward and the actions needed, we also identified some challenges that we wanted to bring to light for your consideration today in this report. We want to make sure the city has the flexibility in finding the right candidate and hiring someone that's got the right experience and leadership skills for this position. And the report before you calls for proposes that the Petroleum Administrator possess current state of California licenses in engineering, basically a professional engineer, which would be a petroleum engineer. And in our research, and this is on page 8 under the suggested BOE qualifications. In our research, the City of Long Beach, which has its own petroleum department and owns and manages its own oil wells, we discovered that in their search for a certified petroleum engineer, it took over 2 years to fill that position because there's a dearth of certified petroleum engineers. So we want to recommend that be a preferred or suggested rather than a requirement. They also discovered that somebody in that petroleum office who oversees and administers a lot of their operations doesn't even have a college undergraduate degree, but has 25 years of experience in the field. We're not suggesting we don't have somebody that's got a master's in petroleum engineering, but we just want to make sure that we find the right person and get them in the position as soon as possible. And then lastly, wanted to respectfully ask that amend Instruction 3 to include the Department of City Planning along with the Board of Public Works and Bureau of Engineering, just given the importance of the role of the Petroleum Administrator in working with planning, given that our oversight of many of these existing wells is all through the oil districts or the conditional use permits. And it's going to be critical that the zoning administrators be able to access the expertise of the Petroleum Administrator in determining if there are additional conditions that need to be put upon existing or future permits.
I'm sorry, I was just handed a card, rather. Can you repeat the other recommendation? Your
To add,
other amendment?
respectfully request that you add the planning department to the report
Okay.
back to address those items that are under their jurisdiction.
Matt, if you can, I know on the qualifications, now the reports, these are all suggested, they're not required, so clearly indicates that these aren't on the required qualifications moving forward, but I understand your concerns. I know you want the best qualified candidate, but at the same time, we don't want to wait 3 years trying to find someone with these.
Exactly.
So you're okay with having it remain suggested? What do you want to do, change the
Well, I think in
term?
that specific, I don't have the report in front of me, but in that specific item, it says, at top it says suggested, and then on that item it says require, or it had some more specific language to the license. in
Can a
that.
CAO respond to that? David, thank you.
David Ronald, the CAO. The recommendations in the report don't specify the duties of the petroleum administrator. The duties of the petroleum administrator are outlined in the body of the report for discussion. So you could act on this report without necessarily specifying by your action those duties. What we can do is we can work with the Board of Public Works to reflect the duties and responsibilities the way that you all think it should be done, along with the mayor's office. Whether it's preferred or required, I think those are nuances that we can put into the actual job description and the recruitment bulletin. I don't think it requires an action on your behalf. But certainly the mayor's opinion carries a lot of weight, so I'm sure we can make that happen.
Okay, so we don't need to amend it, it's already in the report.
I think Mr. Peterson's request to amend item number 3 to include
Sorry, to include the planning department.
is fine. And
Yes, we can, okay,
Check with
I'm
CLA
okay with that,
and we
colleagues, if you are all, but I'd like to hear from the committee. And anything else you want to add, Matt?
No,
You're good?
Just thank you to CLA, CAO, and of course the council for your leadership.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we'll start with Ms. Martinez.
Do you know why the decision was made to place the office within the board and not as opposed to one of the bureaus or the CEO's office?
So when we spoke with the departments and we went over what their needs were and the roles that they played, we went back and forth with them as to where it should go and whether it should go with one of the bureaus specifically, considering more than one of the bureaus has the capacity to help with this function. And we, speaking with the group decided that it would be best with the board, because then the board has the power to decide which bureaus can take the lead on it or which bureaus can help. And so it made a lot more sense to give it to the board as opposed to sticking it with one bureau and potentially limiting the office. So there's a lot more potential if it's with the board as opposed to if it's with one of the bureaus.
I also, as a follow-up to that question, I think the Board of Public Works has been used by the city to highlight and to kind of incubate programs throughout its history. And so if you take a small operation of significant importance and put it in a large bureau, sometimes it gets lost, especially if that is not part of the overall core mission of that bureau. So the Board of Public Works has been very helpful in incubating those kind of functions, giving them focused oversight and allowing them to grow and progress. So I think the obvious one that everyone refers to these days is the Graffiti Eradication program, but we've had some others as well in the past. So it makes some sense given where everyone is in terms of highlighting the importance of this function. In terms of the CAO's office, we did not find it an appropriate fit, and I think if you look at the performance of our office on this subject over the years, I think you would agree. So.
My other question was, why have so many of the city's franchise agreements lapsed? Does DOT have a plan in preventing this from happening in the future?
DOT has a rep here. He'll be right up.
Good afternoon, Jake. I'm from DOT. We've had unprecedented staffing reductions in the last 5 years or so. We have like 3 or 4 full-time employees, and then we were down to a single person, and that person just retired last year. So moving forward, we do have actually plans to update these. We have a batch coming to the council at the end of June, maybe middle of June. And then we'll have additional batches to update all the plans. So we have a plan.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of general questions. And Ms. Martinez, you took the first question that I had in terms of how have so many of these franchise agreements been allowed to lapse. Has there been a financial consequence to that? In other words, do we have a sense of how much that has cost in revenue?
We've been collecting all the payments that are due to us on a monthly basis. And also the insurance coverage and all of that has, been in place. So in terms of any kind of a payment not received or not collecting the bills that we're supposed to collect, there hasn't been any type of financial consequences. It's just that, yes, we would like to get these updated. They're on their way. I have a batch that's coming. And so in probably a few weeks, it should be at council. And there'll be a second batch. And we're trying to get everything wrapped up and cleaned up before the entire function gets transferred over to Board of Public Works before the calendar year ends.
And in this report, you also talk, or in general, not you in particular, but there is a creation of an entire office. What is the cost of that office, and what are the positions?
So far, right now, at DOT, we primarily provide the kind of the administrative function in collecting the fees and having those agreements in place. And right now, we have a full-time engineering position and a clerk position assigned to it. We've had previous positions, but because of the budgetary constraints and challenges, a lot of those positions are swept. Right. However, we believe that moving forward, there should be additional administrative staff that should be part of this new office, and it should be additionally supported beyond what DOT currently has in our portfolio.
So since there have not been costs to running this office, has that resulted in more dollars flowing into the general revenue fund that don't go to salary positions and or franchise tax dollars going into discretionary pots?
Yes, I guess there have been some salary savings perhaps through that, but the CEO could probably speak better to that, salary saving potential.
We know this much, though, that when we get this petroleum natural gas administrator off the ground as soon as possible, and then that combined with extension of the franchise agreements that have lapsed, that this one administrator will be able to basically shepherd those through the process? Are we secure that if we do take this minimum action of bringing aboard the administrator, that we'll be able to get all those agreements renewed?
Well, the idea is
at the bare minimum.
The idea is to kind of buy us a little bit more time. We're doing these short-term extensions, and what it will allow, would be the petroleum administrator to then look at all the issues that have been brought forth by the council and the public, and integrate all those concerns into the next batch of agreements. So that's why the ones that we are bringing forward to you guys, to the council, they have the short time limit. The idea is to, again, get the new unit together, have the petroleum administrator go through all the issues, and make sure that all those concerns are then reflected in the future franchise agreements.
And lastly, just to clarify, so I make sure I understand this correctly, before the Great Recession, there were several positions that handled this,
yes,
this duty, but we never previously had an office dedicated to it. This is a hybrid sort of approach, one that we haven't done before.
Yes, the current situation, the current arrangement is the franchise responsibilities are sort of spread throughout various different departments. DOT kind of has the agreement portion, so it's really like a landlord and tenant relationship. We collect the fees because they're using our right of way. But Public Works had the responsibility of overseeing any kind of construction activity. So if you needed some kind of a permit from the city, they had that piece. And obviously, the idea here is that if you can combine all of these functions, put it under one roof, you would have a lot more leverage. That's part of the reason I think if you had it under and you married it with the permitting kind of powers, you would wield a lot more leverage in making sure that anytime you have concerns about whether it's safety issues or certain terms of the contract, you can bring all of that under one house.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, what I look forward to is when the report comes back for the creation of this new office, I look forward to exploring and you actually being able to justify and demonstrate how that leverage will actually benefit the city and result in additional revenues. But what I'm very comfortable with is moving forward with the Petroleum Natural Gas Administrator as soon as we possibly can. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the reports. I agree. I think consolidating this authority in the hands of a administrator is going to be beneficial for all. But I'm curious about the Council District Real Estate Trust Fund, Property Trust Fund. Who's here can speak on that?
CLA's office can respond.
Yeah.
So,
Tell us a little bit about these funds, and has staff begun exploring options for eliminating some of the restrictions that have...
so right now, the section of the administrative code that addresses these, that addresses the Council District Real Property Trust Fund, it specifically addresses what is done with the oil pipeline money. So according to the admin code, 50% of the oil pipeline money is put into this fund. So 25% of that is allocated evenly between the council districts, and then the other 25% is allocated based on linear footage of pipeline within each council district.
Based on what?
Based on linear footage of pipeline within each council district, and that money is restricted to use on right-of-way improvements. So, but
is there an effort to expand that, or that's just okay the way it is, or what?
So there has been some interest in taking that restriction off the right-of-way, the limitation to right-of-way improvements, and potentially exploring ways to use it for other things. Specifically, we were asked in the context of perhaps using some of that money to fund the office, but we can explore allowing use for other things as well.
Well, how much in funding are we talking about? These different pots?
So from the oil pipeline franchises, I believe the sum that comes in every year is about $2 million.
And then there's, from what I read, $17 million from the gas pipeline
correct, yeah.
franchise.
But that 50% allocation is specifically the oil franchises. So that's how the money from the oil franchises is divided.
So each council district then benefits
Yes.
from the oil and gas?
From oil, every
Just
council
oil.
district
Just oil.
benefits. Just oil, correct. And a portion of it is divided equally, and a portion of it is based on how much pipeline you have in your district.
Okay, so again, any efforts underway to expand that or to?
Right
I think,
now,
Mr. Price, if I can answer that, we need to look at
Yeah.
amending our admin code. And if I can fold in Mr. Jordan here, our counsel. Ted, aside from our own, if I can, Mr. Price,
Yes.
aside from our own admin code, is there any legal reasons why council office pipeline funds are restricted to public right-of-way infrastructure?
I'm not aware of any other legal reason. This is general fund revenue to the city that the city has chosen by adopting that provision in the administrative code to set it aside for those specific uses. We're not aware at this time of any legal requirement to have that, such as you'd have, for example, in some of the cable television franchise money. There are limits on that imposed by state law. Right. We're not aware of any similar provision here relating to the oil pipeline franchise.
And going back to Mr. Price's concerns, back to the CLA, Jennifer, so why are there limitations as the public right-of-way on using these pipeline dollars?
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it has to do with the fact that most of the pipeline runs underground. And so restricting it to right-of-way improvements allows the council districts to protect the right-of-way, which is what the pipelines are under.
Understood. Mr. Price?
Nothing further.
Mr.
Thank
Root.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to go back to the earlier line of questioning from Councilwoman Martinez and O'Farrell, maybe DOT, about the franchise agreements. Can you just briefly walk us through the process of renewing those franchise agreements and the various roles of the different departments? And then maybe follow it up with how this new position or office would participate in all of this.
First, it has to be actually advertised. But generally speaking, it's more of a formality because you already have those pipelines. The ones that are going to obviously bid on those pipelines are going to be the companies. But there is a process that we have to undergo. But in the agreement, basically, we have to figure out, for example, what is the amount of right-of-way they're actually using. So there has to be a calculation that has to be determined. Anytime they cross a public right-of-way is the portion that we can charge for. If they go underneath a private property, we cannot charge for that particular pipeline distance, for example. And then it's determined by volumetric quantities. So you could have different size pipe diameter and the length of the pipe, right? So it's you try to figure out the potential quantity of that pipe that it could move, a certain amount of, whether it's gas, oil, water. And so we go through that exercise in determining what the amount is, the volumetric amount. And then there's a certain kind of formula that we apply that's been approved by the Board of Transportation Commission. And then typically, we'll have language about billing, how it's paid, the insurance requirements. So there's a bunch of typical provisions that get added to that particular franchise agreement. But for the most part, as I explained earlier, the role that DOT has played is, really just a landlord collecting rent from the tenant, if you will, right? Beyond that, we even though we also have, I guess, a responsibility to kind of make sure that some of the safety records the companies are supposed to file with the state agencies are also, in the files. So we kind of handle those kinds of administrative tasks. But beyond that, we really didn't have any leverage when it comes to other kinds of safety concerns. We don't have the expertise in-house, right? This is all substructure, geotechnical type of expertise that's needed. And that's kind of the reason why the working group decided that it makes more sense to have it at the Board of Public Works. That way they can actually employ a lot of that engineering and geotechnical expertise that's really necessary and ask those kinds of pertinent questions about safety regulations. And if you can begin to marry the agreement with the permitting sort of agency powers, I think the city would benefit in the end because you would just have that much more leverage. And right now it's it's sort of in sort of disparate corners within the city, and I think this recommendation is to really consolidate all of those responsibilities and have one office really be
So right now it looks like you guys do the DOT, that's bulk of the work with collaboration with CLA and CAO.
We're part of the team.
Yeah.
There was also a collaboration from public works departments as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other comments, questions? Okay, I have two speaker cards. I'd like to welcome Michael Salmon. Please come forward. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Michael Salmon. I'm an associate professor in the history department at UCLA. I also live on 4th Avenue in the West Adams section of Los Angeles, approximately 2,000 feet from the 4th Avenue drill site and 2,500 feet from the Murphy drill site. I am very supportive of the city hiring a petroleum administrator, which it has not had since 1990. I've been lobbying for this since February of 2014, at which point in time no one knew that actually the city's administrative code had provisions that required a petroleum administrator. So while I support this motion, I have some concerns about the CLA-CAO report. And the concerns revolve around the report's neglect of existing code and neglect of the record of the petroleum administrators who actually served the city from 1958 to about 1990.
Time is up, sir.
That was it?
That's 2 minutes. Give him another minute, please. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. And I know that the report neglected these things because I have worked with the city records management and archives and assistant CAO Patty Huber to find the records of the petroleum administrator. I found them. I've spent the past few months reading them. And what the report says about the planning code, Municipal Code Section 1301, is so tremendously wrong. It says that the code is principally concerned with the formation of oil drilling districts and provides no measures to address the actual operation of sites. Well, if you read the code, and if you go back and read the legislative history of the code that goes back to February of 1945, that is so profoundly untrue. The only thing that can explain it is that the people who wrote this report and the people in planning who spoke to the committee that wrote the report did not pay attention to the code. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Jennifer Kim, our final speaker on this item.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Kim, and I'm with Physicians for Social Responsibility Los Angeles and Stand Together Against Neighborhood Drilling Los Angeles. My comment is very brief, but an important one, that along with knowledge of oil and engineering for this petroleum administrator position, that they should also have a strong background in public health. In 2015, a panel of independent scientists concluded that community public health risks of exposure to toxic air contaminants are most significant within a half-mile from active oil and gas development. We need someone that understands this issue from a community health perspective, as LA is home to the largest urban oil field in the country, happening the closest in proximity to residents. We have seen how unprepared agencies are to answer the health and safety questions related to oil and gas operations in LA. So we ask that the petroleum administrator have a proper comprehensive background in public health on top of what you are all considering. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on this item, I do want to bring back either CAO or CLA. I had a question on the pipeline fees. David Arano, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I should have just asked you to come up.
Okay, if
So,
I don't know the answer, I'll
As
ask
far
for
as
the staff to help
the
me.
revenues of the oil pipelines, why are only revenues from the oil pipelines returned to the community through each council district trust fund and not the pipeline fees for electrical lines and gas pipelines?
I actually don't know the answer to that. That's
Okay.
a history that I wasn't here to witness. So.
Okay. So agreed upon decades ago,
Yeah.
I'm assuming. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, colleagues, with that, on this item, I'd like to amend it. I know there's been some discussion, Mr. Price included, on looking at different ways on capturing some of these pipeline dollars. And I believe the only way we can do so is by amending our existing administrative code. So I'd like to amend the CLA and CAO's report to request the city attorney to prepare and present an ordinance to amend the LA Admin Code, Section 5.500, to delete each reference to the word oil and amend Section 5.500, subsection A, subsection 3, to delete right of way. Second? Okay. We have a second by Ms. Martinez and a third by Mr. Price, if that's included. Sorry. And also approve this joint, and before we approve, I just want to, this is a collective effort by a number of our colleagues that have been involved in creating this office. I do want to recognize Council President Wesson and Mr. Englander, who requested the original motion to be amended to require experience for this new administrator. Mr. Krikorian and Bonin, who did their part in looking at cost recovery options available to the city to fund this position. And Mr. Harristas and Ms. Martinez and and Mr. Koretz for ultimately, collectively, Mr. Cedillo as well, moving forward on adopting this item before us to get to this committee. So with that, we will approve the... right, we do have a couple amendments, and one is from the mayor's office to include the planning department, correct? And also, there's another amendment offered by the CAO. Remind me of that one. Was there another? Provide funding for this fiscal year. Okay. So we'll approve the joint CLA-CAO as report as amended. Okay, that was a mouthful. Without objection. Okay, last and final item, item number 4.
Item 4, motion Martinez-Buscaino, directing the Bureau of Sanitation to report relative to the implementation status of actions taken relative to the on-site containment and retrieval of shopping carts by retailers.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Martinez, you want to tee this up, or do you want to get the presentation first? So maker of the motion, I'll defer to Ms. Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, by the way, for bringing this item forward today. Colleagues, so, you know, many of us have experienced this in our own districts. This issue of abandoned shopping carts are becoming more and more of a problem. They, not only is it a nuisance, but the amount of time that it takes for our individual offices when we do coordinate cleanups or we have our own staff helping with some of these abandoned and bulky item issues in our district, the amount of shopping carts that we're actually having to collect. And then what happens is not only is it the staff time an issue, but there's a storage issue that goes along with it. You know, the sanitation yard in my district in Sun Valley ends up with the majority of these shopping carts from the valley, and it's overwhelming. And so we began to talk about how do we deal with these abandoned shopping carts that are left sometimes at bus stops and parking lots or even in our residential neighborhoods. And they do drag the community down, I feel, you know, by having these discarded carts that nobody seems to care about. It does tend to bring another layer of issues in some of our neighborhoods. So I'm having to grapple with this issue every single day. People complain about them. We try to figure out what grocery stores are responsible for picking them up, but nothing seems to work. There is a phase 1 of the shopping cart ordinance that was introduced by my predecessor several years ago, but it deals with ensuring that these shopping carts are the responsibility of a brand new grocery store. So when a brand new grocery store comes into the city of Los Angeles, the shopping cart ordinance does go into effect, and it does hold those retailers responsible. But nothing seems to, nothing's being done in terms of the existing retail stores that are not being responsible for taking care of their shopping carts. So it's a growing issue, and we really don't have the facilities to house these many shopping carts in some of our yards. So that's why I brought this motion forward and explore the possibility of implementing phase 2 and what that looks like, and have the department issue a report of what the next steps are, because I think this issue is actually getting worse.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lloyd Gaines, manager of the Sanitation Department. Where we at with that now is that we are currently collecting abandoned shopping carts. But the way we look at them is we determine whether they have a label, the retailer's label on them, or they don't have a label at all. And the ones that don't have a label, we include it with our routing and salvage those with the other metal goods that we pick up. Currently, we have 3 different sources we're collecting the abandoned shopping carts, and that's with our Clean Street program, as well as our regular bulky item program, and then our container services program that goes out and repair our customers' containers. Since the recession back then and the major programs that the department started, such as franchising, Clean Streets, indexing, we got a little behind on trying to address this problem. but we did talk to a consultant, and he gave us some preliminary information, and we're assessing that information right now.
Okay, I have a couple questions. So how do you currently enforce our ordinance for the new retailers? Some of them, though, have that lock, the wheel lock mechanism,
Sensor,
the
right.
sensor that automatically locks the wheel the minute you attempt to take it off their property. That tends to work if the retailer actually goes out there and retrieves their shopping carts and puts it back in the store. But if they don't have that mechanism for the new retailers, how are you enforcing the current ordinance?
Well, currently, we haven't got to that part where we can actually enforce it yet. The compliance and enforcement part, we're still working toward that. We really haven't got a handle on that yet. So that is something still a work in progress.
So currently, we just go out and collect all these shopping carts and then identify who they belong to,
Right,
and then
well-
you make the call for that retailer to come pick them up
Yeah, that's
for
currently.
free? We don't charge anybody anything?
Well, not now. Again, this is what we have to assess and get a
Yeah,
better handle on. We've been so busy with all these other programs that.
Right. It's expensive, though, to collect other people's property and then not charge them to
Yeah,
not only retrieve them for them, but actually house their shopping carts and then have them go out and pick them up. I mean, it just doesn't seem like good business practice on our behalf.
Definitely needs a fee attached to it.
Did you have something to add?
Good afternoon, council members. Leo Martinez, Sanitation. You're right about the fee. We're looking at a strategy and how to, we already got a list of all of the retailers that have shopping carts. We redid that with the plastic bag. So we already have a master list of all of the retailers. Our intent is to figure out some kind of fee structure to be able to start dealing with these retailers. In addition to some of our programs that we're already currently doing, the ordinance is very clear on the new construction. It's not addressing the existing.
Right.
And until something happens there, I'm not sure how much leverage we'll have on that as far as that goes. But even the new, there's ways of getting around. All I gotta do is lift the cart up over that mechanism, and the wheels continue to move on the cart. So there are some things that they can do, even with the new program with the wheel locks.
Mm-hmm. But you're currently, in the current shopping cart ordinance, there isn't a penalty when you do retrieve some of these carts, correct? So we need to fix that before we move on to phase 2 of the existing retailers, which the ordinance doesn't even touch.
Yes, I think we need to revise the ordinance so it does give us a little bit of teeth to be able to deal with these retailers. We have some kind of a plan. We're reviewing the consultant's plan right now, and I will be glad to come back at a later date and give you some kind of recommendations after reviewing the recommendations of the consultant. But I think the ordinance has to reflect on the existing retailers as well, not just the new ones, and I don't think it does that very well.
And this is why I think we need to do this.
Yes, absolutely.
Again, it serves as no purpose to continue to collect other people's property, store there, and have them come pick them up with no penalty associated to our ordinance in place.
That would be part of the package, to be able to figure out how we can leverage some fees from the retailers.
Okay, that's all the questions that I have, Mr. Chair, but you are bringing back a report in 30 days. So I believe that's what I'm asking for.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Thank you for your leadership on this quality of life issue impacting all corners of the city. I know we have a couple comments and questions from colleagues. I'll turn it over to Mr. Ryu and then Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you. When we're talking penalties, are we saying penalties for the retailer or penalties for the person who has the cart?
For the retailers.
Okay, yeah. No, and Councilwoman Martinez, thank you for your leadership on this, and I think this is very opportune with us implementing 5611. When we do acquire these shopping carts, it'll be an opportunity for us to return them or, do something instead of just us storing it as well. So I think it's a very timely, and I look forward to this report.
Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I definitely think sanitation, you need the tools. We need to provide you the tools in order to deal with this effectively. I'm going to add something else. There's an element of danger to abandoned shopping carts. There was one on the 110 freeway yesterday, and it was an abandoned cart that had been through God knows what, but it was on the freeway itself, not to mention the ones that ended up in the LA River. So environmentally, what they do, and the risk to the to the public safety is very real. Also, I'm curious about a few things, and maybe you report this when you come back. But the costs currently attributed to the city for picking up all these shopping carts and storing them, returning them, you name it. It would be really terrific to see what costs are associated, and I bet it's a lot of money.
Yes, we're going to quantify our expenditures, our costs related to that. Although there's not going to be dedicated staff to handle them, we're leveraging other programs. But however, there is going to be some cost, and we'll be noting that on the report as well.
I mean, it'll be interesting to see what the costs have been over the years, too. You could probably figure out some formula and then extrapolate from there. But this costs us real resources to manage a problem that should be managed by the business. Also, are you also going to look at the possibility of contracting with a cart retrieval company like other cities do? Or have you done that in the past?
We're looking at several options as part of the one of the options we're looking at could be a hybrid of that. So what we're looking right now is just getting all the information that we received already from the consultant that we brought in. We also have some ideas internally. We're trying to extrapolate all the information and try to come up with a plan that we feel is the most appropriate for this.
And I would suggest when we deliberate on this, first of all, I think it's a terrific idea, so I also commend Ms. Martinez for her leadership on this because it affects all the districts, that we take a look at not just being all the businesses that have come on board since the ordinance was new, but we go retroactive on this too with a grace period. Otherwise, what's the incentive for long-time businesses that have shopping carts to comply with anything if there's no incentive? I think there has to be a financial incentive for everyone to get into the game if we're truly going to clean up our environment in relation to abandoned shopping carts. So I look forward to that information coming back. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
Mitch. And thank you for raising the cart retrieval opportunity there and working with existing businesses. I use those services as a senior lead officer, and Nicole Wells in my office today. They're very active and very responsive. I think a partnership with the city would be beneficial for everyone. Mr. Price?
Yeah. I just want to thank the councilwoman for her leadership on this. This is a big problem in the 9th District as well. And I think anything we can do to encourage or provide an incentive for the businesses to use the technology. The technology is effective, right? You try to go beyond the border there, so it does work. We just need to get it working better. But I'm curious, where are the carts maintained? Is there one yard, or they're scattered around the city in various yards, depending on where they're?
All our waysheds have storage for them. All our waysheds collect the shopping carts. If there is no tag, any kind of markings for a supermarket, it automatically goes to the scrap yard and recycled. If it has,
so that occurs every month. There's a batch going.
Right. So, and then the ones that do have names for stores, we do bring them into our collection yard. We store them. There's a number that we have from these, and we call them. They come in and get them.
Yeah. Now, some of these baskets are pretty cruddy, I would imagine, and they don't want them. So, is there some period after which we just automatically scrap them?
When the names are on it, we can't. That's still their property. So we do go ahead and notify them. But if they don't have any markings, we automatically do scrap them and recycle them. But in any case, they're pretty responsive when we do call. The thing is, I think they have maybe 1 or 2 or 3 people in an area where they need maybe 5 or 6. So they're completely understaffed, and they should be out there, sweeping the streets. But we're going to be doing that and trying to come up and be more effective doing that. And if we have to start, again, we're going to note expenditures and costs and hopefully try to recover all of that.
Yeah, I think we should be recovered. Thank you.
Thank you. One of my frustrations as a senior lead is city attorney, in order to file some of these cases on the theft of shopping cart, each respective shopping center or store had to be marked with the ordinance. And I mean, if there was a Vaughn shopping cart that was stolen and taken, then they'd have to go back to the Vaughns, document to ensure there's proper filing. And oftentimes, some of the markings are not on the shopping cart, which made it more frustrating for officers and community members. That next thing you know, you had a bunch of abandoned shopping carts littering our streets. So I think we'll get there. Appreciate rethinking and looking at this moving forward. And I think Ms. Martinez had an amendment and that she wanted to offer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to amend that we look at a penalty structure for the existing shopping cart ordinance, as well as, reporting back on phase 2 of a phase 2 for the existing retailers.
Thank you. I respectfully would like to request a 90-day for the report, if that's possible.
I'm sorry, repeat?
For the report back, we would respectfully ask for a 90-day time frame.
90, not 30. How about
You do 60. I got to meet you halfway. You got to do 60. Okay, I'll do 60, but not 90.
Okay, we'll approve item 4 as amended with a 60-day report back.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, any other matters? Okay, that was the final item. Thank you. This Public Works Gain Reduction Committee meeting is now adjourned. Thank you for joining us.